A very warm welcome to you this morning on today's event brought to you by SEED, NMIS and the Extend programme from the University of Strathclyde. Obviously, we're going to have a few people joining us as we go, just in this introduction, but we'll get by. So the workshop today aims to introduce key circular economy concepts, explore strategies, methods that can be used to bring sustainability to the core of product development. So hugely important and relevant subject for us all. So it's fantastic to see such a large audience, a growing audience as we go here, for what I'm sure will be an informative, insightful and valuable event. So just to kick off in usual territory, as you can see on the screen, just a bit of housekeeping. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. First of all, as I say, thanks for joining us today. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available initially in the NMIS YouTube channel, so you'll be able to catch up on that. Microphones, webcams are off, just to avoid the usual background noise that sometimes goes along with that. Please do, as we always say on these events, use the chat function. There's plenty of people keeping their eyes on that, and what you put in is what you get out to these. So please do use the chat function. There will be time allocated for Q&A, particularly at the end. It is a reasonably length of session today, but stick with it.
Body, David.
Yep. Okay. And please do enjoy the event. So if you could just nudge me on, Robert, please. Okay. So a little bit about where I'm from. So my name's David McGregor. I'm from an organisation called SEED. Some of you may have heard of us, some of you may not. So just give you a quick whistle stop through SEED. In simple language, we support our members, larger network, to solve and improve their operational issues, and it's challenges raised that determine how and what we do. So from the graphic, you can see some of the tools and options that we do have, from people development with external experts, through to cross-sector and industry support with member experts. So the real value comes from members, or for members comes from the opportunity to reach out and quiz other SEED members and learn from what they do and how they do things. Essentially learning from and adopting the knowledge shared from peer-to-peer networking. So the challenge your business faces or you face could be similar to that already encountered and addressed by another member company. So indeed, the industry panel today, I'm sure, will demonstrate the value of that. If your issue is unique to you, still possible, engage in a one-to-one, maybe a project basis, maybe more likely with an academic partner to identify a solution. SEED, we can facilitate that as well. But one area you might not know that SEED supports directly is the Advancing Manufacturing Cluster Builder. So I'll show you, I'll tell you a little bit about that. If you can move it on, Robert, thanks. So in 2020, SEED was appointed as Cluster Builder Programme Manager for the AMCB initiative, and you can see the graphic that kind of tries to depict that on the screen. The AMCB was established to create a national network of regionally based initiatives, of which there are 12. You can maybe just make them out in the left-hand side. You may be familiar with this already. And they were there to improve the innovation performance of Scotland's SMEs. So the projects aim to support business to adopt contemporary ways of working, helping them to capitalise on new economic and public sector innovation opportunities. The AMCB, interesting, or for the benefit, is free at source, and there's much more really to our role, but I'll leave that for another time. And the projects themselves as well, and also the wider associated engagement. So please do come and ask about it and what it might do for you. So with this being a design-focused event, you've shown an interest in, that could well mean there's something in there for you. So please do come and ask about it. So again, Robert, if you just put it on. What you may be familiar with from SEED, the free-to-all events like this one, in partnership with others often. There are quite a few dates for the diary. I can't list them, so just thought I'd put a couple of graphics of our calendar up there. So please do check out our events calendar. It's added to, regularly updated. There's lots on there that I'm sure would be of interest to you. Okay, put it on again. So I just wanted to quickly show you this, just to kind of nearly finish the seed part, just to show you the current seed team. It might be of interest, but for many, a team of 8 might not seem overly large. But seed has grown by 100% in the last 18 months in terms of headcount, so a significant jump. So our support to the Scottish manufacturing and engineering sectors is growing and definitely increasing in value. So please do get in touch with us and see how we might be able to help you. Okay, move it on. Show it. And just really for the purpose of the slides and for when you've got them, but that's some contact details that you can get in touch with me or the wider seed group. Yep, you can do that in your own time. So just very quickly then, I'll introduce you to the speakers today. So the main contributors to today's event are Robert Lynch, who's a design engineer, and Paul Cantwell, Knowledge Exchange Fellow, both from the Advanced Forming Research Centre and part of the Extend programme, of which you'll hear more about soon. And they are joined from industry today by Craig Lynn, John Houston and Nick Muddle, and they are our expert panel today and will introduce themselves a bit more fully later. So thank you very much for the introduction from Seed, and I'll hand you over to Paul now who will facilitate and lead today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David, and welcome all. So just very briefly, I want to take you through what the Extend programme is about. This is a European Regional Development funded initiative where what we're doing is we're helping industry to break down some of the barriers of adopting sustainable practice and working with them on their net zero journey towards understanding their carbon footprint in manufacturing and identifying opportunities where they might be able to develop service offerings in remanufacturing, repurpose, reuse, or adopt more sustainable practices. We're doing this by 4 key pillars, raising awareness of the impact of net zero on conventional practice, such as with events today or one-on-one guidance. Analysis of organisations, so undertaking some assessment tools that we've developed, such as readiness for remanufacturing or future SME, assessing the company's agile state to adopt new market trends and drivers or penetrate new markets. Offering an advice service on design and process revision to reduce the carbon footprint, conducting life cycle analysis and design reviews of existing products, and connecting you with relevant experts in the area of the research, funding opportunities, or trade associations who might be able to support you on your journey. So we're always open to hear what audiences are struggling with and wanting to see more of to help them on their net zero journey. So please feel free to drop us a line at the end of this event as well. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. So we've got a jam-packed agenda for you. There's 3 segments in today's event. What we're going to ask is for you to just write down the questions that you have in the chat function, and we'll address those in the audience Q&A session. What we'll be working towards is Robert will run through specific themes, identifying the detail of his time spent in the area. Then we'll move towards a panel discussion after each theme to get a perspective from industry and where they are on those journeys in those relevant areas. So without further ado, what I will do is I'll hand across to Robert to, well, actually, I'll allow the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll hand across to Robert to kick off the technical presentation. So next slide, please, Robert. So Craig, would you like to go first, and we'll just follow the order in the slide?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Craig Lynn. I'm co-founder of Filament PD. So we're a product design and innovation agency, and we do a lot within the sustainability kind of circular economy space. So it's something which is coming more and more important from a design aspect. Yeah.
That's great. Nick?
Good morning all, my name's Nick Muddle. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for a company called Scott Euler. We manufacture chain lubrication systems primarily for motorcycles, but also for bicycles and in some cases industrial applications as well. So yeah, this is a subject of interest to us as a business.
Thanks, Nick. And John?
Good morning, everyone. John Houston, Business Development Manager for KRG Specialist Engineering. We are predominantly an oil and gas provider. We have been manufacturing for oil and gas for over 40 years. The main purpose for me in this organisation is one, to try and diversify into other new renewable sectors and also support the sustainability and the life cycle of the company.
Thank you very much, and thank you once again, gentlemen, for joining us to bring that industry perspective to some of these areas that we're going to be covering today. So more from those guys later. Without further ado, I'd like to hand across to Robert Lynch to kick off the presentations.
Hello, everybody. Just before I dive into things today, thought I'd introduce myself a bit more. I'm a design engineer within the design engineering team at NMIS. And over the past year or so, I've been providing design support within the Extend programme. I've always had quite an interest in sustainability and tried to incorporate it into past projects wherever possible. But I think the Extend programme has given me the opportunity to explore the topic in a little bit more detail. Initially, when I was doing my research, I did feel that the topic was quite challenging to research because there's a sea of information out there and it's quite difficult to make sense of it all. Being an engineer, I'm always trying to condense things into bullet points and simplify the problem. So in light of that, one of my personal goals today is to try and share my knowledge in a format that's digestible and easy to understand. Paul's already kind of highlighted the agenda, but I've got a rather strong West of Scotland accent, so I'm happy to say that I won't be presenting for the full 2 hours. That might be quite difficult to listen to. We're going to mix things up with some short presentations by myself and some panel discussions. Again, thanks, Paul, for introducing the guest speakers, but something I want to point out is that in order to get a product to market, it requires a lot of different disciplines. It's not just design or manufacture. It also requires sales, management and marketing. So I'm really happy with this diverse panel and I'm sure it will stimulate some interesting discussions. And I'm personally interested to hear everybody's perspective. So bearing in mind that I don't know how familiar everybody in the call is with product development, I thought I'd kick things off by providing a brief explanation of what product development is. And I think the easiest way to do that is to have a quick run through of the product development process. So this graphic here illustrates the product development process used within NMIS. The process may vary from company to company depending on their situation. I appreciate this. Stages might have different names, or some people have more or less stages, but I think fundamentally the principles remain consistent. So to develop a product, you must first do research to clearly define the problem and establish product requirements. Typically at the end of this stage, you will compile your requirements into a document. At NMIS, we use a document named the Product Design Specification. Using requirements gathered as a reference, concept design can then be tackled, and this is where you ideate lots of concept designs to solve the design problem at hand. Concept designs might be a simple sketch on a post-it note. At this stage, it's not in too much detail. It's not feasible to develop all the ideas that you come up with. You might have 10, you might have 20. So you might have to perform some sort of evaluation in these ideas to down select one or maybe a few to take forward for further development. This development happens in preliminary design, and this is where you materialise your concept into a thing that's got dimensions, form and material. At this stage, preliminary design may be a CAD model or perhaps a 3D printed physical model, that kind of level of detail. Once sufficiently developed, the detailed stage focuses on refining your design for manufacture. You might want to think about things like geometric tolerances or perhaps creating manufacturer drawings at this stage. And finally, the validation stage is all about testing your manufactured product design solution to ensure that all the requirements that you gather from the offset have been met. Of course, anybody that's actually delivered a product development project will know that this step-by-step process in the illustration is not the full picture of what actually happens. Adapted from Damien Newman's design squiggle, this squiggly line's probably a better representation. It can be quite an iterative process, particularly at the beginning when you're trying to figure things out. So hopefully now these are a bit more clearer on what I mean when I talk about product development. So moving on to sustainability, I think one of the key concepts to understand is linear versus circular economy. Linear economy, by definition, is economy where raw materials are collected and then transformed into products that are used until they're finally discarded as waste. Value is created in this economic system by producing and selling as many products as possible. So this definition is visually represented in the illustration on the right-hand side. Products are designed, materials mined, manufactured into products. Products are distributed, purchased, used by customers who finally discard them at the end of their life. Ultimately, where do they end up? Usually landfill. So it seems quite obvious that the linear economy model, this conventional way of interacting with products, is unsustainable. But why do we need to address it now? Well, it's because the problem is being exponentially accelerating. During my research, I've came across some shocking stats and figures that underline why this is the case, but personally, I'm all about simplifying the problem at hand and trying not to get too bogged down with the numbers. Ultimately, I think the acceleration of the linear economy problem comes down to an unbalance between supply and demand, which is displayed in this diagram, which is taken from a circular economy handbook by Catherine Wheatman, which is a great resource for anybody interested. On the demand side, we have an increasing world population, and many of that world's population is now coming out of poverty. This is great. However, this achievement does come with the additional demand for more and better products. And more often than not, these more and better products are ending up in landfill. On the supply side, the availability of resources is depleting, and in turn, our cost is rising. I think a great indicator of this is the current price of timber. I don't know if any of the audience have tried their hand at some DIY over the lockdown period, but personally, I was quite shocked about how much I recently paid for a sheet of birch plywood. I think it was about 130 quid down. It's very expensive stuff. Linked to the extraction of resources, we all know that, we have the degradation of living systems as well. Don't want to go into too much detail in this. It's not the focus of today's event, but we know things like the Amazon rainforest are overall in a state of decay rather than flourishing. So this supply-demand unbalance leaves us with sites like this. Huge landfill sites. Quite shockingly, when I was searching for an appropriate image to use in the presentation, it's not the same photo that's recycled. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of these sites across the world. It's quite shocking. However, if that image hasn't convinced you yet that we need to move away from this linear economy model, then it's also worth considering the Scottish legislation that may affect your business with regards to sustainability. So firstly, there's the Climate Change Act 2019. I would say that's the kind of overarching legislation, and that's the commitment by Scottish ministers to reduce Scotland's emissions of all greenhouse gases to net zero by 2045 Secondly, there's the Procurement Reform Act 2014, and within that there's the Sustainable Procurement Duty, and that requires that before a contracting authority buys anything, it must think about how it can improve the social, environmental and economic well-being of the area in which it operates. And thirdly, there's the Environmental Protection Regulations 2021. This is something I found out through watching the news a few months ago, and it's all about single-use plastics. However, I don't think it comes into effect till June of this year, 2022. So it dictates that a person who supplies, offers to supply, or has in their possession for supply items such as polystyrene cups, food containers, and single-use plastic plates in Scotland actually commits an offence. So in Scottish terms, of course, this means that you can expect to see your fish and chips to be served in a different form of packaging this summer. It's not going to be the usual polystyrene container. If your local takeaway doesn't abide by these rules, you might get the police at the door. So what is the answer to this unsustainable trajectory of the linear economy? Well, many people agree that the answer is the circular economy. By definition, circular economy being an economy that is restorative and regenerative by design, and which aims to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times, distinguishing between technical and biological systems. Similar to my slide on linear economy, the definition is visually represented by the diagram on the right-hand side. Through better design, material selections, creation of local supply chains, we definitely have the potential to reduce a product's carbon footprint. However, to close the gap, I also think we need to include some additional circular economy strategies, these being rethink, reduce, remake, recycle and recover. Purely based on the first letter, these are often quoted as the R strategies, and I'll cover them in a bit more detail in the second section of today's event. However, that concludes my first presentation. Many thanks for listening. I'm now going to pass over to Paul, who will lead the panel discussion around our journey towards circular economy.
Thanks, Robert. And we encourage actually the audience as well to write in the comments box their response actually to this question. And the first question is, where would the companies position themselves at the current moment in time? Would it be to the extreme of the left, still kind of trying to transition from the linear economy, or are they making good progress to the right, establishing where they fit into the circular economy and have established their kind of net zero strategy? And I'll invite Craig to go first.
Morning. Yeah, it's a really interesting space, and kind of being a design agency, we're developing products for kind of clients and also for ourselves. So for us, it's we have a really strong strategy in kind of pushing towards circular economy. What we do find is that there are still kind of barriers in place, and the kind of key barriers being, commercial barriers. Sometimes it's not the cheapest solution in comparing, a circular economy model to a linear economy model. So often, that acts as a blocker to introducing some circular models. And the other thing I would say as well is the kind of key thing is in customer behaviour. Any new circular economy model that you introduce has to be convenient to the end customers, because that's often when things fall down. So it has to be convenient and has to be frictionless. And in situations where it can't be frictionless, that's when we need to start kind of looking at almost like the stick as opposed to the carrot. So what legislation has been brought in to kind of enforce that change? So it's a really interesting time, and definitely I think there needs to be a balance between carrot and stick to actually achieve kind of circular economy adoption.
Thanks, Craig. Nick?
Yeah, I'd really echo what Craig's saying there. I think there's, for us as a business, we're probably, in terms of position on that timeline towards circular economy, we're probably between trialing and implementation, and we sort of circle back round on the various aspects of our business at various points in time, trying to sort of rethink what we're doing to see if we can be better. But the biggest challenge for small businesses, I think, is the cost of implementing such strategies. That will reduce with time. That's just the nature of the beast. And it requires an effort from everybody to get involved in trying to further this, because this, to me, this is a much better strategy to take going forward, and it helps resolve a lot of the big issues that were mentioned in the earlier presentation. Looking down our supply chain, there's also, I think, a big responsibility required on the logistics companies to sort of take some to make some big moves forward and make things easier for us to do, especially smaller businesses. And there's also a huge responsibility on customers to change their behaviour. Now, I understand also that some of customer behaviour is driven by the manufacturers, but equally people need to be making the right choices, and sometimes the right choices are more costly. So it's a difficult balance to strike, but certainly for us as a business going forward, we want to keep moving towards the right of that timeline towards a more circular economy strategy.
Thanks, Nick. And John?
Yeah, hi guys. I think listening to Craig and Nick, we bounce between planning and implementation. And that is quite a broad scope for us. Being a manufacturing business, we don't have any off-the-shelf product or IP, if you like. The biggest issue that we really do see or come across at the moment is actually understanding the skills that we are going to need in the future to actually support the sort of circular economy. We have a lot of influence by our customers on what we make, so we are relatively limited. We try to push for design at manufacture, where we discuss product, obviously features and materials to be used to try and support the circular economy at the end, and even refurbishment. But actually the main issue that we will see within manufacturing engineering is skills, because there's actually such a skill shortage at the moment, and with regards to it not being, if you like, a sexy industry to get into, and also going forward, really identifying the skills that we need to maintain a get away from the linear to the circular. And I think that's a big issue within engineering. Obviously, the cost comparatives that we're going to have to introduce to actually achieve it are also an issue. And I would like to also mention, sort of, even though we're moving towards this net zero for 2045, we have to be very aware that we don't push away our emissions and the manufacturing to other countries that have not got as stringent sort of actions upon them, so our criteria. So that's something that's a fine balance to make for a manufacturing company.
And across the group, are you kind of getting the feel that it would actually help the industry move to this area if we could better showcase some of the organisations who've already taken the steps here and identified the key skill sets and kind of share their lessons learned over time? Is it bringing exposure to parties such as yourself and your client base?
Absolutely. We will start to see all our tier ones really driving this down through the supply chain. And a lot of words are being said. The cost is becoming almost as equal. I would say it's almost, they're saying that your sort of circular, your sustainability, etc., is held in such high regard as price. So price is starting to move down the table. I've not seen that coming through yet, because they always still come back for a more competitive price. So, but that's really what they are driving towards. They are certainly saying that if you can sort of promote your sustainability actions, etc., then the price is potentially secondary to that. So that's encouraging.
And for the group, you know, what do you think would really help your organisations achieve the net zero 2045 targets? So we touched upon kind of carrot and stick scenario, but for your own organisations, what do you think would really truly help move that kind of milestone to be achievable?
I mean, I think we've been talking about, sustainability is nothing new. We've been talking about it for the past 20 years. It just seemed to have rebranded it slightly with a bit more immediacy recently, certainly with COP being on our doorstep. So I think that, yes, it's there's an element of kind of sharing and an element of I think kind of resetting what the expectations are. And I think that's the thing until you have things like extended producer responsibility coming in, which is actually then putting kind of levies and making the cost of not being sustainable less affordable than actually that transition. And I think that's kind of what has to happen. I'm afraid that if you don't have those levies, if you just have targets, then there's always going to be people that kind of fall through the net, and there will always be consumers that will basically go for the cheapest option still. So I think it kind of has to be across the board.
Brilliant.
I'd like to say,
Go on, Nick.
what Craig's saying there on the stuff, the extended producer responsibilities are actually, I think, a really important driver of change, because we do a lot of business in Germany, and there's a lot of requirements upon us there, whereby we need to make sure that our products are seen through to the very end of their life cycle and then recycled and repurposed. And I think that Germany kind of lead the way a little bit on that front. Yes, it is a bit carrot and stick, more stick than carrot, but I think that the costs of implementing it are relatively low, but they do bring people along because you have to do it in order to trade there. The big challenge, I think, for a lot of companies is trying to keep up with the legislation and the rules and regulations, and some of them can be very detailed, very time consuming, and government support in order to be able to work your way through that and make sure you're on point, and then also maintain those standards going forward, I think could make a big difference. And there are some good places to turn for that at the moment, but I think a little bit more could help with that.
Brilliant, thanks, gents. Robert, back to yourself, and we'll just cover the second topic.
Okay, many thanks, everybody. So moving on to the second section of today's event. So we touched upon it in the last section, but now I'm going to go into a bit more detail into the circular economy strategies, or the R strategies as they're also known. In doing my research, I found this area of sustainability to be a bit confusing, as there's lots of different variations of it. Some people refer to the 3 Rs, some people refer to the 9 Rs, some people have different names for the Rs. The 5 Rs that we've landed on at NMIS are rethink, reduce, remake, recycle and recover. We're not saying that these are gospel per se, but we do think it's important to introduce some sort of standardisation to the terminology to avoid confusion. One point about the Rs I want to draw your attention to is the ranking with regards to how impactful they can be in reducing a product's environmental impacts. It's commonly agreed that keeping the circular economy loop as small as possible minimises that lost energy, for example, from transportation or from reprocessing. And therefore, strategies towards the centre, such as rethink or reduce, typically carry a larger weighting. Although, something to note, these are not always the easiest to incorporate into every business. So, as seen in the illustration, you may have noticed the addition of a car and some of its components. I've selected the car as a product example to help with the explanation of each of our strategies. I wouldn't say I'm a car fanatic or a piston head, whatever you want to call it, but I do think it's a good example, as it's quite relatable. Everybody knows what a car is, and it's quite a complex product. It's got lots of components, and therefore there's lots of opportunity to apply circular economy strategies. So the first R strategy is rethink. To pull out a definition, it's all about improving the utilisation of a product. A rethink example for a car may involve the car manufacturer adopting a servitisation business model. In contrast to a traditional automotive business model where customers buy or lease individual cars, this may involve customers paying a fee to have access to a range of the manufacturer's cars. So Without owning multiple assets, the customer can then pick the best suited car for their journey on demand. Such a business model may prevent that common sight of a driveway being packed with, a weekend sports car, maybe a people carrier to take the kids to school, a works van, maybe even a motorbike in the garage. For the most part, I'll try to stick to the car example, but I think one of my favourite rethink examples was a commercial carpet company, the kind that might fit out an office. So rather than tearing up entire carpets for new ones, their product was carpet tiles, which enabled them to offer a service in which they install and maintain office carpets, simply replacing individual carpet tiles when they're damaged or worn. Thinking about the large floor spaces in offices, maybe you're sitting in one at the moment, it's clear that such an approach would have a significant effect in reducing environmental impacts over time. So moving on to reduce, by definition, this is optimising and minimising the amount of energy and material used during the manufacture of a product. A reduce example for a car may involve the reduction of material and unique individual parts used in the centre console assembly. So that's the thing in between the passenger and the driver's seat, In contrast to having lots of independent plastic knobs and buttons to control many functions, say one for AC, one for media selection, volume control, etc. This may involve adopting a single display unit which combines many functions into the one. I don't know if this is aesthetically driven or for weight reduction purposes, but I have noticed that this kind of minimal interior look for the centre console assembly seems to be quite popular in newer electrical vehicles, such as the Tesla Model 3. Remake is an internal NMIS term used to encompass repair, remanufacture, repurpose and refurbish end-of-life pathways. We could probably have an entire other presentation about the work done in this area, but for the purpose of today, I'm just going to keep it quite high level. A remake example for a car may involve the remanufacturing of an alternator. This process requires collection, tear down and inspection. Any wear and tear components identified are then replaced with new ones. The remanufactured alternator is then tested to validate it is at least returned to its original performance. Just something to note, in general, remanufactured parts typically carry the same warranty as a similar new part from the same supplier. Recycle is probably a term that everybody's familiar with. We do it in our day-to-day lives with the recycling bins. By definition, it is the reprocessing of a product, component or material for use in a future product, component or material. A recycling example for a car may involve recycling material from car body panels. Typically made of steel or aluminium, such metal materials can be collected, sorted, melted down and reprocessed into new products, components or raw material. Just something to note, reprocessing in the form of casting, forming and forging may require a significant amount of energy. So while this recycling is good, it's not always the optimum option when thinking about the circular economy. Recover is the incineration of material with the aim of recovering energy. A recover example for a car may involve burning shredder residue in an energy from waste incinerator. Shredder residue typically consists of non-metallic materials not separated out for recycling, such as glass, fibre, plastics, or even dirt. Just something to note, although not a preferred option, recovery can count towards the UK government's end-of-life recovery targets. Yeah, it's not the ideal situation, but I can see how such a strategy may be more applicable in a manufacturing environment. Perhaps small wood scraps left over from a furniture manufacture facility can be collected and then perhaps used as fuel for a wood-burning heater to heat up the facility. So that concludes my second presentation. Many thanks for listening. I'll now pass over again to Paul, who will lead the panel discussion around circular economy strategies.
Thanks, Robert. That's brilliant. So we'll just open up the panel again and we'll go in reverse order. And the first question is, are you currently adopting any of these circular economy strategies around the kind of rethink, reduce, remake, recycle, recovery in your organisation and against your current products? And we'll go with John first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within manufacturing, we've always been sort of at the forefront of trying to support recycle simply because of cost constraints. But we're actually doing it a hell of a lot more now with regards to trying to bring in our customers, really to get them in at the design stage. If you can get design stage and actually bringing in, one of the main things is understanding the full landscape or the full demand. So as opposed to having people sitting in individual silos and asking for one component, we try to see the multiple components and then we can actually manufacture as opposed to, and that what you manufacture parts within parts, if you like. So what you're doing there really is you're saving materials. So as opposed to just taking out so much material and having it as swarf and then just sending it to the scrap to get melted down and obviously get brought back in, what you're really trying to do is actually manufacture multiple parts of the same material, which again really reduces down on the transportation, the delivery of the materials that come, and when you're actually reusing the materials, that does cost money and it does take energy also. So what you're really trying to do is reduce that right down. What we really do also is look at the sort of consolidation of deliveries, something that is very simple, but as opposed to spreading deliveries maybe 3, 4, 5 times across 1 month, we try to really set up our order book and components so that deliveries are only going out once a month. So it's just that's the rethink side of it. With regards to reduce, we do a lot of sort of filtration on our lubricants so that we can really try to reuse them again as much as we possibly can. Obviously, then we have to add other chemicals in there. But again, that is really starting to be driven within the business. One of the examples that we looked at, we have old machinery. Some of them become redundant, but trying to move with new technologies, it doesn't mean you just bring in all the new sort of nice fancy equipment. You have to try and reuse what you have, otherwise it defeats the purpose. So we have some 3-axis machines that we're starting to try and introduce, and turn them into almost 5-axis with a twin table, but also the support of additive manufacturing. It was very simple and very basic at this side, but what that does is that's as opposed to putting something onto a scrap heap, we're now using that to drive new technologies to give us an understanding of the new technologies that we may see useful within the business going forward. So I think all 5 are very important. They all go together.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. That's a brilliant response. Nick?
Yeah, so as a business, we would, as much as possible, try and incorporate all 5 of the R's. I guess we're kind of founded on our principles of trying to make motorcycle chains and sprockets last longer. We've already rethought that problem from the outset. But then in every aspect of our business, we're always looking at other ways in which we can make improvements. As a company, we've been carbon neutral since 2015 through offsetting. We employ simple things like recycling of the lunch containers that people are using within the office. We've got solar panels on the roof, but we're also doing other things with our supply chain, whereby if we receive some products in, maybe they'll be packaged in plastic bubble wrap. We'll then return the plastic bubble wrap to the supplier and ask them to reuse it. So these products are going backwards and forwards rather than ending up in recycling. So there's lots of different things that we try to employ throughout the business, but that doesn't mean that we're complete and we finished it yet. There's always more areas that we can make improvements. And one of the things that we're exploring at the moment is the remanufacturing end of things. So our products, as much as possible, we encourage people to fit them to their motorcycle, use it for the duration of the ownership of that machine, and then move the product onto the next machine, or sell it with the machine and buy another one for the new machine. So that there can be the longest life cycle for our products. We have customers who have got products which are 15, 20 years old and longer. But we do encourage people to reuse, and then if the product gets to its end of life or there's a failure for whatever reason, we can return those products to us, and we can look at how we can reprocess them to make them new, good as new. So yeah, we're trying to think about the full end-to-end cycle at the moment, but there's almost too many things to, as a small business, there's too many things to do at once, so we have to sort of pick and choose. But it's good because it means we've always got a list of other things that we can do.
Thanks, Nick. That's brilliant insight for your area. Craig, I guess would be interested to hear from being a design house, how much this is now coming into kind of the services or even your client base request. Are you beginning to see evidence of this and having to change your approaches?
Definitely, yeah. You are kind of seeing projects that are wanting you to really kind of focus on that rethink stage, to go in and analyse what they're doing currently, where they can improve, and it's about where do you focus. So what we often talk about is that it's this kind of the 80-20 rule, is that often you can have probably kind of 80% of your impact by focusing on 20% of your input. So it's looking at that initial analysis to try and kind of focus where that initial impact can be had, and then, as you say, you can then plug the gaps round about that. I think one thing that certainly looking at circular economy strategies, additional to the 5 Rs, is really this kind of continuous analytics and monitoring. We've got projects that are packaging as a service, so effectively they're supplying coffee cups to cafes, collect them in at night, washing them and putting them back into the ecosystem. Now you sit down at the start of that, you look at a life cycle analysis and you do a calculation that says, okay, if you use this cup X number of times, it's more sustainable than going for option B, option C, option D. However, if you're not actually measuring how many times you're actually using those cups in reality, then you don't know if the system you've introduced is actually more effective or not. So in that, what we have is every single object has a unique identifier, which is scanned every time it comes back into the wash facility, and that is generating constant analytics into the real use cases, and it's that feeding that additional information back in then allows you to do things better and continuously improve. So I think that's the one thing I would always say in terms of the kind of strategies. You consider the 5 Rs, focus your attention, kind of using the 80-20, but then make sure that it's a continuous improvement strategy that you implement and that you're actually monitoring the impact of it kind of going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. And Robert, I'll actually invite you to comment on this as well from our client base and what we're observing.
Yeah, I think we touch upon them all. I think I've been an engineer myself. You're always drawn towards things like reduce, trying to make things mechanically optimal for using less amount of material as possible. On a recent project, there was also a big focus on selecting a recyclable material. Personally, I found as if I was digging a bit deeper into the sheets and really trying to quantify that the product material isn't just recyclable, but there's also a kind of infrastructure locally to enable that recycling of the material. So yeah, I think we're touching upon them more and more now in projects, and I think something that I've noticed as well, it's also touched upon in applications before we even land a project. So it's really been built into the way that we're tackling product development now.
Thank you, Robert. And I'll briefly touch upon the second question, because I think the panel have kind of mentioned certain key aspects. So John, you talked about not starting from scratch again, investing in the current capital equipment that you've got, and appropriately identifying technologies can help upgrade it and decarbonise. Nick, you spoke about, you know, prolonged life of assets in service and working with your client base and exploring remanufacturing opportunities to adopt. And Craig, you rightly pointed out, you know, it's important to benchmark to inform decisions as well, to capture how many things have been reused, and does it actually have validation to having a positive impact rather than a negative impact. And I guess where I've kind of got a question is, you know, do you agree with some of the language that we've selected here and we're using, and what do you think some long-term are that will help you to maybe improve your carbon footprint for the future? I'll go to Nick first, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think the language used is great, although I also like the Bob the Builder version of reduce, reuse, recycle. But no, listen, the 5 R's I think is a great way to approach this for people that are maybe not thinking in this way. But I think fundamentally the most important is the rethink. You know, if you can start from that point of view of I don't know what I can do to improve. Let's think about what I can do to improve and go from there. I think you really open up the opportunity book to try anything and anything new. I think for us, that's probably where we're going to see the biggest impact long term, along with the other end of it, which is the recover, because the remanufacturing stuff for us is still a new thing. One thing we do try and do is get everyone in the business involved in that rethink journey, because it's not something that's just led by the guys in product development or the guys in the sales and marketing or the customers. It comes from business-wide, whether that's the accounts department, because they might see an opportunity due to a cost rising that maybe we hadn't seen previously. It comes from within our manufacturing team or our purchasing team. So we really do encourage the rethinking from the outset.
Yeah, just to jump in on that, Nick. Yeah, I do think having everybody at the table is very important, because something I'm wary of is if we go to an extreme length to make a product very sustainable, and in doing so we make it extremely expensive, nobody buys it, and you know, you could potentially run the risk that the product ends up in landfill simply because nobody's bought it. So I know cost isn't the focus of today's event, it's sustainability, but you need to have a balance between them. Everything needs to be considered. You want to have a balanced product solution that ticks all the requirements.
Yeah, I agree.
John, do you want to come in?
I think the language is absolutely excellent. I mean, it's, for engineering, you have 5S and everybody's very familiar with that. So 5 R's really just makes it very simple for people to understand. And I think going back to Craig and Nick's comments about the circular economy and life cycle analysis, I mean, it's essential that you have the data as opposed to walking into some of these decisions blind, if you like. And I think what Nick was saying, we have strong leadership here also to actually really articulate the benefits of the sustainability journey. But at the other side of that, again, every employee across the business has to be empowered to play their part, let's say, have their own individual responsibilities, and then they bring the new ideas and the ability to act on that. And that's where we really see the benefit, and it changes the culture for the better.
Brilliant, thank you, John. And Craig?
Yeah, I mean, language is important, but you know, I was at a COP event where I was sat, and there was a panel discussion of 4, you know, high-end designers, and they were basically discussing the semantics of language about circular economy for 40 minutes, and I came away really frustrated, and it was just like, it doesn't need discussion around language, it just needs action. So it's for all of us all to agree that yes, we need to be doing this. We don't need to then spend another 5 years discussing, you know, with the language of it. We just need to understand that this is something we need to do, and we need to start acting on it. So totally, and yeah, everyone can find their own version of the 5 R's, 4 R's, 3 R's, 7 R's, just as long as they're implementing it in their strategy. I think that's the most important thing.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we've finished the second section of the presentation today. What we'll do now is we'll move just to a 10-minute comfort break. So we're looking to reconvene at 5 minutes past 11 o'clock, where we go into the importance of product realization and design to inform decisions. So thank you very much. Please do come back for about 5 minutes past 11 o'clock. And we'll kick off the proceedings with the third and final part of this tech talk today. So we'll just mute and switch off our cameras and then rejoin at 5 minutes past 11 and start over again. Thank you. Okay, so we should all be back and raring to go for the final segment. So without any further ado, I'll hand back to Robert, and he'll be able to present to us the key role that design plays in this area.
Many thanks, Paul. So why should we focus on product development to tackle sustainability? Why can't we just tackle the problem further down the line, say in production or disposal of the product? Well, it's commonly agreed that over 80% of all product-related environmental impacts can be influenced during the design phase. If we reflect back on the car alternator example I used to explain the remake strategy, specifically the remanufacturing of alternator, if that component's designed with lots of unique parts, say it's got multiple screw types and multiple screw sizes, it's going to be extremely difficult to disassemble, clean and inspect. As a remanufacturer, there's only so much that you can do on your end to improve the process. The problem really has to be addressed from the offset through better product design. So how do we actually incorporate sustainability into the product development process? Well, before fully exploring sustainability through the Extend programme, I'm going to be honest, I thought it might be tackled at a specific stage in product development using one or two methods, the first coming to mind being life cycle assessment. However, the more I researched the area and reflected back in some past customer projects, it became apparent that to integrate sustainability successfully into product development and to generate a product that's truly fit for this circular economy model, sustainability has to be considered from the offset and throughout the product development process using a variety of different methods. I like to compare tackling reduction of carbon emissions in a product to how you would tackle cost of a product. You can't just tackle cost halfway through product development. You have to define the cost requirements up front and continually keep tabs on that throughout the project. If you don't do this, you're going to run the risk that the product will be too expensive, the customer won't be willing to buy it, and ultimately the business might fail. So what methods should we use? I've plotted out some here on the INMIS product development process diagram with some arrows indicating at what stage they may best be used. However, all of the methods highlighted might not be necessary for every single project. I appreciate that. I think methods used are very much going to vary from company to company and might even change from project to project. I don't have time to cover all the methods shown, but just elaborate on a few. So regarding Design for X or Design for Excellence, any designer or engineer will be familiar with Design for Manufacture and Design for Assembly. Obviously, if you don't do these or do them badly during product development, you'll have to deal firsthand with the issues that might arise. For example, manufacture delays or increased manufacture cost. I feel that in order to make this circular economy transition, Design for X approaches such as Design for Remake and Design for Disassembly need to be considered at the same level of importance as Design for Manufacture and Design for Assembly, and we should try and consider them as early on in the process as possible. For end-of-life identification, it sounds really obvious when you think about it, but you have to consider how a product's going to end its life at the early stages of design. Is the product going to be remanufactured, repaired, or should specific parts of the product have recyclable material? Having the answer to this question early on it's essential to guide the subsequent product development tasks and to give you the best chance that you're going to optimize your product design for the end of life pathway that you select. So life cycle assessment is probably the buzzword method that everybody's heard of when it comes to sustainability. This being a means of assessing environmental impacts associated with all stages of the life cycle of a product, considering things like energy used during manufacture, material extraction, and distribution of the product. I think people commonly think of it as a verification method to analyse the carbon footprint of a product that's already been developed or manufactured. However, taking a more proactive approach, I think I've seen some good examples in my research of designers and engineers using it at the early stages of product development to guide design decisions. For example, to assist evaluation of concept designs, you may do a high-level life cycle assessment of different concept designs, say concept A, concept B, and concept C. Perhaps concept B is shown to have the lowest environmental impact as it uses less material and the manufacture processes used aren't very energy intensive. This advantage of concept B could be factored into your decision process on what design you want to take forward for further development. And finally, I think one of the most important ways to integrate sustainability into product development is by setting it as a success criteria from the offset. As engineers and designers, we often rise to the challenge of product requirements such as must cost less than X or must safely hold a load of X, but I think we need to be more ambitious with setting product requirements relating to sustainability, stipulating things like materials must be recyclable, manufacture processes used must be available in a local supply chain. You get the idea. Typically, product requirements are collected at the beginning of product development and are detailed in a document. I highlighted this before, but at NMIS we use a product design specification or PDS. And in the last year, we've adapted our approach a little bit more to be considerate of sustainability. So this revised version of the PDS can be seen in the left-hand side. As normal, we have all the requirements categories detailed from the offset to ensure that nothing's left out of consideration. These can be seen in that middle green column and consider things like functional requirements, as well as things like materials, costs, supply chain, etc. If all aspects are considered, that gives you the best chance of creating a balanced product solution, not just one, for example, that just looks cool. What we have added in the PDS tool recently is the 5R strategies that are covered in the second presentation. These are shown to the left of the categories, and we've plotted out what categories they are most relevant to and provided some guidance notes for each. So these can be accessed by hovering your mouse over the appropriate box. For example, in the materials category, considering the recycle circular economy strategy, it provides suggestion to use a recyclable material. That's quite obvious. And also perhaps consider what regions of the product that recyclable material might be used. And down the bottom, regarding supply chain requirements, thinking about it in terms of the reduce strategy, the prompt suggests considering supply chain partners that are actively looking to reduce their environmental impacts. What we really want to avoid is a situation where we go to an extreme length to make the product itself very sustainable, but we have no visibility of the environmental impacts of its manufacture. I think overseas manufacture is a bit of a dark secret when it comes to the sustainability of products, and bringing manufacture back to the UK is something I really push for wherever possible. The example I used to fill out the PDS tool is for a recent NMIS project named Ski Wedge, which focused on maturing the manufacture and materials of a ski tuition aid product. Can't share the full details of the design, but hopefully the image on the right-hand side provides a little bit of context. So mainly driven by sustainability considerations, we were able to identify a local manufacturer within the UK to manufacture the product. Obviously, this reduces carbon emissions through decreased transportation, but I just want to highlight some other advantages. For example, it's easy to visit the facility without a large time or financial commitment, perhaps to see how clean the manufacturer's processes are. Or if you want to get some samples made, you're likely to expect much shorter lead times. You're definitely not going to be waiting weeks, if not months, to have it shipped from the other side of the world. Being a design engineer, I may be a bit biased with my thoughts on this, but I think fast turnaround of samples or prototypes can be invaluable when you're trying to get a product to market, particularly at the early stages of development. Yeah, I appreciate manufacture cost might be more expensive locally within the UK, but weighing up these advantages along with things like import taxes, the difference isn't always as significant as it might seem in paper initially. So that concludes my final presentation. Many thanks for listening. Apologies to going on a bit of tangent there at the end with supply chain. Now I'm going to pass over to Paul, who will lead the panel discussion around methods and tools.
Thanks, Robert, and quite timely because I noticed some of the questions in the Q&A looking around this. So I'm interested to hear from the panel. What methods and tools are you currently using to plan in your current state and future state of product launches, and kind of your informed sustainability strategies? And I'll go to Nick first.
Thanks. So we, as much as possible, I won't go into the specifics of what we do at design level because that's not my area of the business. I'm from the sales and marketing side. But broadly speaking, what we try and achieve is we try and achieve visibility of our end goal. So we bring everyone in the business along with the journey of developing new products. And I think that's a really important aspect of the product development cycle. If you think about developing a product in exclusivity and you don't think about how it's going to be packaged, we've had a great example, a point of sale display that we wanted to put out into our international market. We made material choices, size selections, etc. And then when we started shipping it around the world in a box, it started to break. And what we realized is that the material selection wasn't actually the right choice for shipping it globally, and we ended up, to solve the problem, had to put a huge amount more cost, time, and material into the packaging of the product to make it work than if we'd chosen a different material. And that could have been solved earlier if we'd looked at the logistics of shipping it around the world as part of its design stages. Equally, because we manufacture in-house a lot of our products, we have to think about how are we actually going to manufacture this? How are we going to make it? And Robert touched on a really interesting point there about onshoring your production, as well as the increase in the speed that you can process all of the prototyping. There's also the essentially inevitable issue of there's going to be a problem at some point. You're going to have to deal with it, and that could be in the development stage or it could be when it's in production. So you've got something onshore, it's a lot easier to deal with, a lot less time, a lot fewer issues with language potentially, and also things like different New Year's and holiday times that you have to take into account when you deal with people overseas. That said, we have a bit of a balanced approach. We have a bit of both. So yeah, to answer the question, broadly speaking, our approach is we try and make it visible within the business, and we try and make sure that people are aware of our sustainability credentials, both internally and externally, so that we feel like we're responsible to others for that.
Thanks, Nick. And John, I'll move to you, but I'll also ask, does that mean that you're both starting to adopt life cycle analysis in your products to review them? And John, I'll let you go first, and Nick, you can come back in.
Within our organisation, and as I said, we are still, I would say, relatively early on this journey. We came up with an acronym that's simply called SPAR, with a double P, and it's not in any particular order of importance, but really that looks at the shipping, the production, the product design, the aftermarket, and the raw material selection. So that's what we tried to encompass everything into there. So when we go through that in order, obviously we're reducing the carbon footprint of transporting the raw materials and components and delivering of the final product. Then you're looking at the production, which we look at improving the operational efficiency, reducing waste during production, implementing smart production technologies, and even also at that point it's training. So we use a lot of augmented training, augmented reality tools to sort of support training, and this is at the very early stage because that gives us repeatability also within the processes. Product design really lies with our customer, but they do benefit from us, and it supports reducing costs. And to go back to your main point, about 80% of the overall related environment, the environmental aspects of it, but the cost are really essential at that very, very early design stage, and that's where you get the most benefit from that. So we are rapidly incorporating the use of raw materials in the design process, of new materials, etc. in there. So, and just moving through it like that, aftermarket is obviously essential, as we spoke about, which is shifting towards a circular economy model by providing spare parts. We do a lot of repairs, we do recycling and disposal services if and when required. And that's pretty much the tools and the methods that we expect to be using going forward. I still come back to the main thing about identifying the skills that are going to be required, because they are new skills to our business that we would not traditionally have targeted. These include, I would imagine, the analysis of the company's emission data, set targets, being able to articulate the pathways, the forecast costs. All of these things are really, really important when you're actually going on this journey for us.
Thanks, John. And Nick, giving you a bit of chance to reflect when we come back.
So in terms of the processes we put in place as a business, we have to adhere to certain ISO standards, so 14001 probably being the most important in this regard. And that process of continuous review forces us to go back through the mill each time and review, are we doing things as efficiently and with an environmental mindset? So that's important. We also have an IQEMS, an internal quality and environmental management system in place, which we use alongside the ISO to continually sort of review what we're doing. And then, as I say, just encouraging that open mind and open conversation around what is it that we're doing and where can we make improvements. And sometimes some of the best changes you can make come almost out of the blue by being open to new ideas. So we take a bit of a two-pronged approach to it. We have systemic processes, and then we also respond to the ad hoc stuff as it comes up.
Thanks, Nick. And Craig, would you like to come in from your side?
Yeah, I mean, all these tools are great, but there kind of has to be the drive and the strategy to kind of want to use them in the kind of correct manner, for them to actually make any sense and not just become a kind of tick box exercise. You know, across the kind of wider market, what is quite promising is that you're actually starting to see a lot of kind of larger organisations now have a C-suite or director of sustainability. So it's about that kind of driving that strategy from the kind of the top down, to make sure that it isn't an afterthought. And I think that's kind of the key thing. You know, it's about, you know, these are all just tools in the same way that there are multiple other tools about developing new products. So it's just about having the right strategy to use them. You know, use the most appropriate tools at the most appropriate times.
Thanks, Craig. And Robert, I'll invite you to come in on this to say, you know, how are we seeing a transition of tools and what tools are coming in to support our clients?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched upon it in the slide about where does sustainability fit. I think a lot of the tools and methods, for me personally, it's some of the same stuff that we've been doing before, but it's approaching it with a different mindset, a different hat. You have to do material selection and projects all the time, but it's really putting that sustainability hat on and challenging decisions. You know, it's ticking the mechanical requirements, but does that also fit our sustainability requirements? It's factoring that into the equation. As I said, we've modified the product design specification a little bit to be more considerate of sustainability. I think that's really important because, yeah, I feel as if product development kind of, at the very start, it can go one path or another path, and if you set that direction early on, it makes things go a lot smoother. So if you can start to think about things early on, typically you're avoiding that rework and iterations. Not personally, but I know there's quite a lot of work in the centre around life cycle assessment. I believe there's a kind of network within the University of Strathclyde working in that. And regarding Design for X, I don't think we're quite to the same level that we would tackle design for manufacture or design for assembly, but I think in the next year or so we would like to mature our knowledge in that and incorporate it into the design reviews that we use in customer projects. So in some aspects we're already there, but in other aspects, yes, it's a work in process. We're just always learning.
Thanks, Robert. Now, John, you kind of partly covered this in your first response, and I'll direct it mainly to Nick and Craig on this. You know, we pointed out the statement of over 80% of all product-related environmental impacts can be influenced during the design phase. Are you potentially in agreement to this, and do you see this kind of informing your kind of direction to address it, as we're so dependent on import of feedstock material as well? And I'll go to, sorry, Craig. I've started naming people, so I'll have to continue.
Yeah, no, totally. It's kind of what I was saying earlier on about the kind of 80-20, is if you can kind of find that focus on which is the kind of largest impact, then it's definitely you need to do it at the design phase. The whole ecosystem is constantly changing as well, so you're trying to hit a moving target. And as Robert said earlier on, there's a lot of issues in terms of the infrastructure right now. So it's often you're looking at projects and you can find some really nice, quite exotic, new material. But when it actually goes to the recycling centre in Glasgow, if it doesn't have a mark on it which they understand what that material is, then it's just going to be stuck in landfill. So there is a bit of kind of catch up to that, and I think that's you should always be kind of looking at that kind of design phase and then looking at the kind of wider ecosystem to see which new opportunities are becoming available to you. So yeah, it's a constant, reiterative process. So it's not you do it once and then that's it, you've ticked the box, move on. It's something you do need to kind of keep on looking at. And as I keep banging on about, have it as part of your core strategy.
Brilliant, thanks, Craig. And Nick?
Yeah, there's not much more I can add to what Craig's saying there, but I agree. I think you have to focus on it at the design stage. You really do. And if you think back sort of 10, 15 years ago, this wasn't a conversation that people were having. So the great thing is that it is now on the agenda. It's on the learning programs for people that are coming through as new design engineers, and they'll be the future. So yeah, I think it's really important. That's all I've got to say on that, I think.
Thanks, Nick. And I guess I'll slightly change the way the last one's asked, but where do you think the responsibility actually falls for developing sustainable products? Do you think it sits within the designers, the engineering department, or where might this need to be driven in organisations? And I'll go directly back to you, Nick, on the first instance.
Sure. So I mean, everyone has to carry some responsibility for their choices. We can't just say, well, we're not going to buy sustainable products because they cost more. Sometimes you need to make the right decision and spend a bit more to do the right thing. But I also appreciate that that's not possible for everyone to do. I think as a business leader, you need to drive your organisation towards thinking in this way, and you take responsibility for the overall think of the organisation. So I don't necessarily think that we can single out a particular department and say it's fully their responsibility. I think it's everyone's responsibility, both within the organisation, from the top down, and then also from the consumer side as well. So it's a shared collective responsibility that we all need to head in the right direction on.
Thanks, Nick. Craig, from from your side?
Yeah, totally. Everyone has to kind of share that. But an interesting point you just brought up there is that you don't want sustainability to be exclusive to a certain demographic of people, because affordability, it has to be open to all. And you could draw a bit of a parallel to inclusive design. It was probably kind of a movement within product design prior to this, and it's all about designing products so everyone can use them. The able bodies to the less able bodies, but still, you go to an airport and there's a coffee machine, and you're basically bending down to pick out a roasting hot coffee. So there's always going to be good examples, good outputs, and bad outputs. So it's just about trying to kind of push more into those good outputs.
Thanks, Craig. And John, over to yourself.
I think I can't disagree with anything the guys have said, but I do believe that you need to have a common awareness, not only responsibility, but it's a real awareness there. It's a very good analogy that Craig's making about the coffee cup. So unless it was a very small designer, then I'm sort of struggling to find the sort of logic behind that. So, but no, absolutely, it's everybody's responsibility, but you need the awareness first when you actually try to flow that through, and then everybody will have the common buy-in.
And John, with the program that you've kind of launched in your organisation, you kindly shared with us, is that awareness kind of helped you as well on that engagement with your client base as well, just to flag key aspects of their asks?
Absolutely. Our clients are now actually being a lot more proactive with getting us in at design stage. So they call it DFM, which is simply design for manufacture. So they are now driving us and trying to pick on our capabilities and knowledge to support them at the design stage, because you can design absolutely anything, but the manufacture of it is when it starts to become quite complicated. So it's about actually sharing knowledge, if you like.
Brilliant. And Nick, are you seeing similar things in your market where you're having greater engagement with your client base, or is it more public perception driven, do you think, for your area?
We've got a very interesting market. Ours is quite an aged demographic. It tends to be predominantly male, and it tends, I think, to be quite slow to uptake to new technologies and to get on board with greener thinking. So as an organisation, we can sort of sit back and say, oh, well, that's the market that we cater to, so we don't do anything about it, or we can try and, in our own little way, blaze a trail. And it's a difficult path to follow. But again, taking the responsibility on our shoulders of everyone needs to do their bit, it's what we're trying to do. And we're by no means perfect, but we are trying to improve. And I think that's a really important aspect of it, is that a lot of organisations or individuals might look at what they do and say, well, what difference can I make? But actually, collectively, if we all try a little bit, and I like to think that we could all make some progress towards everyone moving in the right direction and having an impact on the needle.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. That's great. And Robert, I guess from our side, we're seeing quite a multidiscipline kind of engaged and trying to be informed on this process. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I just want to maybe touch upon what John said about the importance of that design manufacture relationship. I've got quite a good few number of years experience now, and I have a good appreciation of manufacture processes with regards to cost and suitability, but personally I think I need some more knowledge, and probably maybe John's somebody that could help with that, is learning about how different processes, how clean are they? How does a machining compare to 3D printing compared to sheet metal bending? I don't think that knowledge personally is with me at the moment. So I would like to be at a stage where that in the early stages of design and can factor that into your decision process and what concept design you might take forward for further development.
Absolutely, Robert. But obviously, understanding the function is essential. And then you can actually apply the manufacturing process to suit. And obviously, everything has a different carbon footprint depending on what it is. But the functionality, you can never get away from the functionality. And obviously, the life cycle also of the product now is what we're looking at. But anything you want to come and ask, I'm here, an open book.
Yeah, as much as designers and engineers think they know everything about how to manufacture products. I don't know how many times I've went to a manufacturer who does it on a day-to-day basis, and they've made some really good suggestions. You know, perhaps nest it in a different orientation, and when you're setting up the machining process, or I think you highlighted before, John, maybe you can combine a couple of products into this same manufacture procedure. So I think that relationship's key going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Robert. And I think everyone agrees on that basis. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to give you, the audience, some time to just think through if you've got any questions for the panel. But beforehand, Robert's going to kindly just do a takeaway summary of the programme. Then I'll review any questions that have been written up in the comment box, and I'll address them to the panel, and then we'll do a closeout. Over to you, Robert.
Yeah, hopefully the audience is still with us. It's been quite a long session, but yeah, just to cover a quick 3 takeaways from each of the 3 topics today. So the first one being the learner economy model is not sustainable, and we must transition towards a circular economy to prevent irreversible damage to our planet and to meet the Scottish Government's commitment to be net zero by 2045. We think reduce, remake, recycle and recover are 5R strategies that can enable product life cycles to transition from a linear to a circular economy. The design phase has a large influence on product-related environmental impacts. Several methods, for example, product design specification, design for excellence, life cycle assessment, etc., can be helpful when trying to integrate sustainability considerations into product development. Okay, that's it. And moving on to the Q&A.
Thanks, Robert. So just looking through discussions, one of the first questions raised were what tools and support are or is available for companies starting their journey on the net zero target? So I've actually got an answer to that, but what I'll actually ask the audience, the panel, sorry, is what support have you received that you found to be most helpful to your journeys? And I'll start off with Nick.
So we have always been an account managed business with Scottish Enterprise, and they're a great resource. We turn to them for a hell of a lot of support, whether it be in finding market data or getting us in touch with experts in a particular field. Most recently, we were talking to someone about intellectual assets, but anything really that you think, well, I don't know where to start with, that's our point of contact, and we will always use them as much as we can. And in a lot of cases, they're also able to access routes to funding for us. So again, as a small company, access to funding is really, really important, especially when it comes to delivering on things like environmental management. So yeah, Scottish Enterprise, I'd say, is our first port of call, and then obviously Google.
Thanks, Nick. John?
I mean, Scottish Enterprise, yeah, absolutely. I've been using them more and more for stuff like this. What we tend to be using quite a lot is obviously Scottish Engineering, being part of that, and UK MOD manufacturing institutions really are very supportive, and everyone is driving this. We're quite lucky that we work with our tier 1 clients who feed directly into the MOD, and they are very knowledgeable. They have task forces that are driving us and really, really putting a real impetus to flow that completely through the supply chain. And it's also quite a big part of SC21. When you start to pick up all these initiatives, and that's a good thing to see, that this sort of green revolution, if you like, is getting brought in on a number of different fronts. So
thanks, John. That's brilliant input. Craig?
Yeah, in terms of kind of good resources and case studies, Ellen MacArthur Foundation is great from a circular economy point of view. And then what we've had had some good success in over the past couple of years is kind of Innovate UK and kind of KTN. So there's great opportunities for kind of innovation within this space right now. So a lot of the most recent Innovate UK competitions do have a kind of focus around circular economy sustainability. So it's always worthwhile keeping an eye open for them, because they sometimes can give you, you know, a good kind of financial runway to go and kind of really dig into looking at a kind of new business model or new business case that makes it kind of more sustainable over a 3, 4, 6 month feasibility period.
Brilliant, thank you, Craig. Robert, do you want to start going through some of the offerings we've got in this, and I'll pick it up?
Yeah, just to echo Craig's point there about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I think that's a really great resource for everybody. If you want to read more about sustainability, it's got tools and a lot of reading material. Yeah, you can engage with the Extend programme. I can maybe elaborate on some of the specific points that we've talked about today. I'm happy to share my knowledge, and then I work within the design engineering team within NMIS. So again, if you want to maybe progress that into a project, maybe we can help with that. There's also the wider NMIS teams, and perhaps there's an issue that, you know, I can't quite answer. Maybe it's a specific sustainability issue relating to a specific manufacture process. Say it's an additive issue, I can put you in touch with the machine and additive team.
Thanks, Robert. It's also worth mentioning with the Extend programme, there are some free services to companies starting out or already on their journey around key considerations for products with a view of design for remanufacturability and recoverability, or also there's company assessments to help them understand 10 of the key categories if you're considering to start offering servitization or remanufacturing as a service. Some key questions you need to ask about your client base and operations within your own organisation. These are standard tools, standard frameworks and approaches that will come in and facilitate and run those programmes, again, free of charge to small to medium-sized enterprises. And we can't help but promote Zero Waste Scotland as well, a key collaborator to the Extend programme, with various tools and service offerings in this area. Another question we've got is, would we define CE, circular economy, and net zero as two distinct aspects of sustainability, net zero being a CO2 emissions target and circular economy relating to what ends up in landfill? They'd appreciate the panel's thoughts on this. So I guess, is that in agreement to the two statements that have been made there, or is there different aspects in their own views? Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I think the targets for kind of net zero decarbonisation, you know, a lot of these can be achieved by looking at circular economy systems and models. So I think that they're all kind of interlinked. I think, you know, and it will need to be kind of innovative business models, circular economy systems, you know, looking at, do you need to develop another product or is there another solution there? So there's kind of multiple solutions to kind of all get to that target. But as I said, you know, I think we need the targets in there being the kind of stick that is going to kind of force us into action. So.
Brilliant, thanks, Craig. John?
Sorry guys, I actually missed that question. Somebody sort of banged my door, hence why I turned my camera off. My apologies.
Nice, John. All it was is, do we agree with the definitions of kind of net zero being a CO2 emissions target and circular economy relating to what ends up in landfill? You know, in terms, do we agree with those are the remits and how they're currently defined, or should they be approached in other ways?
No, I think, well, what I've been really looking at, and again, I'm still at a very different level of maturity, even listening to some of the other panelists. I mean, the 10-point plan for the Green Industrial Revolution, I was sort of trying to dissect that, along with the decarbonisation strategy about ambitious carbon emission reduction targets for industry. And that's obviously to support the UK's net zero effort. So I mean, that strategy expects industry's emissions to be reduced by 2/3 in 2035, I believe. So I'm jumping between that, and I mean, there's a lot of our industry. Manufacturing has been a massive contributor to the CO2 emissions since 2018. I mean, the targets, it's a big effort here, but I'm sure we'll get there. I think we are confident, because ultimately I think there's a lot of benefits that come with this sort of strategy and this initiative.
Thanks, John. That's brilliant. And Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two are intrinsically linked. If we want to achieve these targets, we have to employ strategies in order to help us get there. And I think the circular economy strategy from a design point of view is a great one for that. But we've also got to look and think, like Craig mentioned earlier, you know, the Pareto rule of 80-20. Let's look for where can the big wins be made, and let's concentrate the majority of our efforts on that. And sometimes that isn't onshore. Sometimes we need to think about it within our supply chain. You know, one of the dirtiest ways of moving things around the world is international shipping. But because it doesn't sit within anyone's borders necessarily, it doesn't become a topic of conversation. So yes, everything that we're talking about today is valuable and does move us towards those targets. We also just need to think beyond what's been written down on paper for our targets nationally. And is there other things that we can do, and are there other ways that we can think about how we operate as businesses that might influence some of those other areas, such as what we use for shipping.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick, and key point there. There's another question here in terms of how the panel organisations balance the net zero actions with many other business needs and how they prioritise those. I'll go to John first.
We have tried to put the strategy not just as a bolt-on objective, so we've actually got it in here as a core function now. And we try to build things around that. We do see a lot of changes coming up for our business. There have been obviously changes through COVID with hybrid working essential and supply chain issues. So we have been driven to change or adapt due to that, but it's really been possibly a good time to help us move. So without even knowing it, we've actually had a lot of these initiatives in place, and I think that's what Robert was saying, but it's just coming to them and observing them from a different direction and sometimes promoting them. So we have got a lot of ethical sort of work that we try drive as well within the community, and I think that's a big part of sustainability as well. You know, it's not only watching out for product. I know this is the design side, but what we are really looking towards is to try and bring in the sort of the local area and the people here and actually drive sustainability into them, not only in the business. They go hand in hand.
Brilliant. Yeah, good point, John. Nick?
Yeah, I really echo what John's saying there. I think there's a need for us to tell people about what we're doing. For many years now, we've had a lot of strategies in place that we've done, and they've been behind the scenes. And more now, we're starting to say to people, look, this is what we've been doing, this is what we're planning to do, and this is what we're currently doing. And I think it's important, not just, you know, it's not showing off, it's not saying, you know, look how great we are. It's really about saying to people, we're doing this, you should also be doing this. And actually, the more people that are saying those and speaking in that kind of language, the more commonplace. And actually, by not speaking that language, you become the minority. So I think getting it out there and promoting it is a really good aspect to this, as John mentioned.
Thanks, Nick. And Craig?
Yeah, I mean, we actually see a real great opportunity within kind of, you know, shift to decarbonisation, net zero and circular economy for our business, because we help companies come up with new ideas and transition to that. So, you know, our kind of main mission at Filament is that we want to create meaningful products that have positive impact on people and the planet. And when you kind of look at things that those simple terms, then, you know, we're going to help our clients kind of get to that as well.
Thanks, Craig. There's a question specifically for John, and we can actually open up to the panel. Do you find any specific sector you work with to be more up to speed or ahead of the curve? So an example is SE21, for example, versus oil and gas. So it's to John first, and then probably Craig after.
Okay, for me, and we are, I'm trying to diversify into multiple sectors. We see defence drive SE21. It's a management tool that they will use, but they seem to be very ahead of the curve with regards to the sustainability and the ethics. I think when I even look at the renewable sector, yes, it's booming, everybody's talking about it, but their levels of maturity are a lot less than even oil and gas. Now, oil and gas and renewables, you see the new BP advert, it's as if they've never done oil and gas before. They now are just totally promoting that they are almost a renewable energies company, and it's all about marketing. So, but for me, to really answer that question, I do see defence sectors driven because they're so close to the government actually moving. They are ahead of that, and they're not only driving sustainability, but they're also driving a lot of ethics, etc. So that would be my response to that one.
Thanks, John. You're getting compliments on the chat as well, supporting what exactly you've just said. Craig?
I think a lot of the industries that have a kind of high volume of consumables, so kind of FMCG, cosmetics, these are all industries that are probably slightly ahead of the curve, just because they have to be. There are other industries. We did an interesting Innovate UK project looking at the paint industry, because everyone's got a cupboard that with at least 4 litres of paint sat in there. So how do you kind of look into preventing that ending up at landfill and kind of capturing it early to kind of repurpose, reuse it? So there's a lot of catch up, but there are some sectors that are just with the sheer volume of waste that they generate and packaging they generate that they've had to jump on it quicker.
Brilliant, thanks. And Nick, is there kind of any industries that you kind of have in mind to take guidance from, as you're saying this is a growing area for your area and your demographic client base?
So we do a bit of work with the cycling industry, and we've historically always worked in the motorcycle industry, and they're two very different markets. The consumers in them are very different. Of course, there's an overlap of the Venn diagram, but I think the outdoorsy cycling market is very environmentally switched on. The motorcycling market and automotive sort of offshoot, if you will, the consumer not so much. But as I say, the demographic is slightly older, whereas in the cycling industry, you tend to have a lot of younger people coming into it. So they're two very different markets. However, if you look more broadly at the automotive segment, from an industrial point of view and the products that are manufactured and how they think about it, they really do, I think, lead the way in a lot of terms. Motorcycling, unfortunately, is kind of a small offshoot of that, so it tends to follow rather than lead. So we look across at the cycling segment, and we take a lot of initiative and a lot of ideas from that, because it seems to be so forward-looking, in contrast to our main industry, and it's really refreshing to see it, I must admit.
Thanks, Nick. That's brilliant. It's encouraging to hear as well. So we're now at the end of our questions from the audience. I'd like to thank once again the panel for taking time out of your busy weeks to participate in this. It's been most useful to hear the voice of industry. Thank you very much, Robert, for the effort going into the presentation content. I'm sure everyone's found it of most interest. And again, please do get in touch with SEED or ourselves at the Extend programme and the National Manufacturing Institute Scotland if you've got additional interest in this area. Right now, this year, we have free support to small to medium-sized enterprises to help them on their net zero journey, and we're keen to kick this off to get you ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, because this funding will only last for the next 12 months to actually help you to review your products and see how more sustainable practices can impact your future products and your future client base. But once again, thank you very much. This will be available online at MNIS, and have a good rest of the remaining week, and I'll give you 6 minutes back of your time. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, Paul.